Hey, what's going on, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be doing my NFC North record prediction video. If you guys haven't seen the rest of the record prediction videos, make sure you go watch that. I have the NFC East done in the NFC and the entire AFC done. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down and giving a record prediction for each team in the NFC North. So let's get right into the video. The Green Bay Packers were somewhat expected to pivot off of the loss of Davante Adams from the 2022 offseason when they traded him to the Raiders. After Aaron Rodgers lost his number one weapon, he had his worst year in the last 10 years. It was his first time in the last 10 years he had double-digit interceptions and a QBR lower than 50. And speaking about Aaron Rodgers, he was dealt to the New York Jets this offseason, as the Packers now look to build around Jordan Love, who they drafted in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. As the Packers were really salary dumping and just preparing for the draft, they didn't really sign anybody in free agency and were one of the losers. Outside of the Rodgers trade, Allen Lazard signed with the Jets for a $44 million deal, and the biggest offseason deals outside of the NFL Draft was signing Keeson Nixon to a one-year deal. The Packers have two lanes for this season. They can either begin the rebuild or they can continue to try to win now. The latter seems like the less viable option as they are starting Jordan Love, and this is going to be his first year starting after only starting one true game in his 3-year career so far. I find it so funny and surprising that the Packers actually decided to draft offensive skill position players when Aaron Rodgers left. They drafted Luke Musgrave and Jaden Reed in the second round, and Tucker Kraft in the third round. The Packers offense is fine. They've got some good players like Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, and Elgin Jenkins. They've got some quality young guys in Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jordan Love, and they've got a pretty decent offensive line. Their defense is relatively their better unit, with a solid defensive line unit in Kenny Clark and Preston Smith, along with Rashawn Gary. They've got a pretty good defensive front mixed with their solid linebacking core and also solid secondary, led by Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas. Luckily, Jordan Love won't have to face the hardest teams in the league as they have the 24th hardest strength of schedule. But overall, I don't know what you expect me to say about the Packers. They lost a Hall of Fame quarterback this offseason, and from a team that already went 8-9 last season, how could they possibly be any better than with a Hall of Fame quarterback? It's a good young team. I think they're rebuilding. I don't think Jordan Love is going to have a bad year. I have them having an extremely rough start to the year. I have them essentially going 1-9 to start the year, however picking it up by the end of the year, as Jordan Love and the rookies get more comfortable in the system. The Chicago Bears were a bad team by pretty much every metric outside of rushing in 2022. They were a bottom 5 defense and a bottom 2 passing offense, however they were arguably the best rushing team in the NFL. With Justin Fields, David Montgomery, and Khalil Herbert, they were such an efficient rushing team. However, every single other aspect of their team was extremely disappointing. But the biggest thing that happened to them all year was the Justin Fields breakout, especially on the ground. He over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground. In my eyes, he also slightly developed as a passer from his rookie year, but Justin Fields was by far the best quarterback rushing last year. But Ryan Poles, Bears GM, was extremely active and crafty this offseason. The Bears went 3-14 and had the number 1 overall pick, and they traded that to the Panthers for the 9th overall pick and DJ Moore, as well as 2 more first rounders in the future. Not mentioning how extremely good of value they got for the number 1 overall pick, which they weren't even going to use on a quarterback. They were able to get a true wide receiver 1 for Justin Fields. Say what you want about DJ Moore, whether he gets too much targets or whether he's one of the most underrated receivers in the league. He has consistently had some of the worst quarterbacks in the league and has gotten 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season. He's been an efficient receiver and a very reliable receiver, and I would argue he's in the top 20. And did you know that the number 1 thing that helps improve your quarterback is to get a dominant wide receiver 1? Look at Jalen Hurts when he got AJ Brown. Look at Patrick Mahomes when he got Tyreek Hill. Look at Tua Tagovailoa when he got Tyreek Hill. Look at Joe Burrow when he got Jamar Chase. All of those quarterbacks had an uptick in offensive passing production, and I expect the same with Justin Fields. If he can have a true wide receiver 1 that can be his reliable downfield passer, there is no doubt in my mind that Justin Fields will improve his passing numbers. But with that, Justin Fields is also probably the best rushing quarterback in the league next to Lamar Jackson, so that is an elite aspect of his game that can't be changed. Going back to Ryan Poles, they made 3 big offseason signings that in Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, and Nate Davis. And the Bears were also able to re-sign Cole Kmet to a 4-year deal. It's good that they signed 2 very good linebackers in free agency. However, the Bears traded Roquan Smith at the mid-season mark last season, and you paid Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards a combined $90 million. Why didn't you just keep Roquan Smith? He's a top 3 inside linebacker in the league, and in my opinion, he's the second best. And you signed Tremaine Edmonds to a $72 million contract. Meanwhile, Roquan Smith got $100 million over 5 years. That's only a $2 million difference in AAV. And I'd much rather have Roquan Smith than Tremaine Edmonds. And that's not even hate to Tremaine Edmonds. Roquan Smith is just that good. But thank God the Bears have built somewhat of a decent receiver core around Justin Fields with DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, and Chase Claypool. You're at minimum going to have an elite run game because Justin Fields is just that dude on the ground. But you also have Devontae Foreman and Khalil Herbert Herbert. Two solid guys along with your offensive line, which you've been slowly rebuilding. They even drafted right tackle Darnell Wright 10th overall this year. But remember how I said their defense was bottom 5 last year? It is once again going to be a bottom 5 unit. They arguably have the worst defensive line unit in the league. They generate zero pressure. The linebacking core has improved with Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, but expect them both to have career worst years due to the fact that the defensive line is just that bad. And then the secondary is pretty good with Jalen Johnson. They drafted Tarek Stevenson. They have Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson, but expect them to allow a lot of points. I quite like the Bears for this season, especially on offense. The rushing game should be really elite, and I think that the Bears will improve in the passing game a ton. But man, their defense is going to let them down so much, and I see them slipping in close games. But I think the Bears will be better than a lot of people expect, and I think Justin Fields has the potential to enter his name as a top 10 quarterback. All right, let me get this out real quick. No way the Minnesota Vikings should have been a 13-4 team. There's just no way. Like, they went 13-4 with a negative 3-point differential, and they went 11-0 in one-score games. That's just so lucky, bizarre, and unheard of. That is quite literally an NFL record, going 11-0 in one-score games. And that fact was really prevalent in the playoffs. They lost to the Giants 31-24 in the wild card round, but I really don't know how they won that many close games. Maybe it was because of Justin Jefferson, who won the Offensive Player of the Year. Maybe it was because of new head coach Kevin O'Connell, just being able to scheme up wins at end of games. But my opinion of the Minnesota Vikings has drastically gone down over the offseason. After having a bottom 10 defense in the NFL, the Vikings signed Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. Brian Flores, ex-head coach of the Miami Dolphins, who once led 2 top 5 defenses in the league. And their biggest player offseason addition was Byron Murphy to a 2-year deal. But man, oh man, did the Vikings lose a lot of players this offseason. Because they're in quite literal cap hell, they released Dalvin Cook. Adam Thielen signed a 3-year deal with the Panthers, and Dalvin Tomlinson signed with the Browns. And also after requesting a trade, Zadarius Smith was traded to the Browns. Not to mention Danielle Hunter also requested a trade. So your defense was already bad last year, but now 2 Pro Bowl edge rushers want out of your team. You lost your best interior defensive tackle. Outside of Byron Murphy, you quite literally have no secondary. You already had secondary depth issues last year. Patrick Peterson had a really good year last year, and he's signing with the Steelers. Obviously, I'm not going to question their offense. Kevin O'Connell is a great offensive head coach. Kirk Cousins is solid. They do lose Dalvin Cook this offseason, but Alexander Mattison should step up as the RB1. But when you have Justin Jefferson on your team, I'm not really concerned about your offense. After letting go Adam Thielen, they're replacing him with first-round rookie Jordan Addison out of USC. They traded for TJ Hawkinson at the midseason mark last season, and he performed great with them in the second half. Christian Darrisaw had a massive breakout, but the offensive line is missing a lot of depth. But man, I think this defense is going to be rough this year. I'm really glad they hired Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, but I don't know how he's going to perform with this bad of a depth chart. Like, outside of Danielle Hunter, they really have no defensive line and won't get much pressure. They really don't even have any linebackers outside of, Jordan Hicks. And the secondary is extremely rough, too. They really don't have any depth. They're relying on second-year player Andrew Booth Jr., Byron Murphy, who's a slot guy, Harrison Smith, who's getting up there in age. Like, this defense has to be one of the worst in the league, right? And yeah, I think the Minnesota Vikings are a pretty solid team, but you can't look me in the eyes, tell me their off-season losses, and then expect me to say, oh yeah, they're gonna win the division again. Cool, they went 13-4 last year, but when you look deeper, you realize how lucky they got. And you pair that with the fact that the Lions only got better and are now competing with you for the division lead. Your defense got so much worse, and you lost 2 important offensive skill position players. I think they'll be a solid team, competitive, but they will not be a playoff team. And I have them going 8-9, and I could expect them to do worse. The Detroit Lions. What a feel-good story. Arguably the worst franchise in NFL history is finally good. I remember last year when I thought they were going to go 5-12, and man, did they really shock me, because they ended up going 9-8. It looked like the prediction was going to be correct at the beginning of the season. They started off 1-6, but they finished 9-8. And man, I know you guys love that take. In actuality, my Lions prediction video last year was probably my worst take of all time. But we're back this year to make amends. I hope that some of you stuck around from last year to remember that, so you can see the Alex Regan NFL redemption arc. They had a pretty solid offseason too, with signing CJ Gardner-Johnson, Cameron Sutton to a 3-year deal, and signing David Montgomery. However, very unfortunately, they did not re-sign Jamal Williams, franchise legend, as he was signed to the Saints on a 3-year deal. Pour one out real quick. But man, did you guys see their draft? Hold on. Dude, their draft was the epitome of you have no idea what I'm doing next. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs 12th, which is wild for running backs to go that high. And I even really like Jahmyr Gibbs. I had him inside my top 20 players. And then at 18, they drafted Jack Campbell, which is also another crazy pick. He was expected to be drafted in like the mid to late second round. And then they drafted Sam Laporta over Michael Mayer. But then they had a really solid pick in drafting Brian Branch, who was also in my top 15. But then they said, I'm going to draft Hendon Hooker in the third round, which was a wild selection. And then they drafted Broderick Martin. And then in the fifth round, they drafted somebody who I've never heard before in Colby Sosdal. Man, they just had such a wild draft. I hope that people know how good the Lions offense was last year. After promoting Ben Johnson to their offensive coordinator position, the Lions in 2022 became 5th in offensive DVOA. They put up the 4th most yards per game. They put up the 5th most points per game. They were top 15 in rushing yards per game, and they were top 10 in passing yards per game. Their offense was so good, yet their defense was very rough. They were 28th in defensive DVOA, and they allowed the 3rd most points per game in the league, while giving up the most yards per game. They consistently found themselves in absolute shootouts. And that was extremely fun to watch, yet extremely painful, because if they didn't blow that many leads, they would have been in the playoffs. Since they were a top 5 offensive team last year, I don't see why they can't repeat as a top 10 offense at least. They have a great offensive system under Ben Johnson. They have a good receiving core if Jameson Williams didn't get suspended for 6 games for gambling. Jahmyr Gibbs should be excellent in the passing game, and they have a good running back duo with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They've got a top 5 offensive line. I would consider it top 3. And Jared Goff has really honed into his own, and I would consider him a top 15 quarterback. But the defense really needs to step up if they want to win the division and make the playoffs. Defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn needs to step up his secondary. They just allow way too many yards, especially through the air. They had a lot of rookies on defense last year, and they're entering their second year, such as Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston. James Houston, by the way, extremely underrated player. The linebacking core is going to be good, especially with Jack Campbell. Even though he was overdrafted at 18, I don't care. He's a really good player. And over the offseason, they did a really good job of adding secondary players with Cameron Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, and CJ Gardner-Johnson, as well as Kirby Joseph having an excellent rookie year. But the Lions are blessed with a very reasonable strength of schedule, the 20th hardest in the league. And listen here, I am all on the Lions hype train. I have them not only winning the NFC North, but going 11-6 and finishing 3rd in the NFC. Look at all that blue on the screen. Just look at it. But now the redemption arc is complete. After my worst take of all time, I have the Lions going 11-6. Come on, guys, I made up for it. To recap, I have the Lions going 11-6 and making the 3rd seed, the Vikings going 8-9, the Chicago Bears going 7-10, and the Packers going 6-11. In my opinion, I don't think this division will be as competitive as many think. I think that we'll have some disappointing teams like the Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers. However, the Lions and the Bears, I think both have good years. But that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you watch all of my AFC record predictions, and make sure you watch my NFC East record prediction as well. But again, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.